Let's make the best no-knead bagels you'll ever have. These ones are extra soft and chewy with that signature golden shiny crust. They're so easy to make, and once you've tried these, you might never go back to store-bought bagels. There's nothing like homemade bagels. They're delicious. Make a big batch, store these in the freezer. They make the best breakfast sandwiches. All you need to make these bagels is a big mixing bowl, a tray, and a pan. The pan I'm using today is made by today's sponsor, Made. These fantastic pans are used in thousands of top-rated restaurants across America with over 100,000 five-star reviews. They're also used in 3 Michelin star restaurants, Alinea in Chicago and Le Bernardin in New York. If these pans are good enough for their food, I promise you they're good enough for anyone. I'll tell you more about why this pan is so useful later, but for now, let's get on to making the bagel dough. To a large bowl, add the warm water, sugar, salt, oil, and yeast. We're going to give these ingredients a good whisk and add the flour in one go. You want to mix everything together with a fork. If your dough seems dry, don't be afraid to add an extra 1 to 2 tablespoons of water. Even if you're using the same flour as I am, every flour absorbs liquids differently, so you might need a little extra water. Now eventually, you'll have to switch to using your hand or your fork will bend. You want to wet your hand with water and continue mixing, making sure there's no dry patches of flour and dough. Using a wet hand really allows you to hydrate any dry patches of dough. Now this recipe is a no-knead variant of the bagel recipe in my cookbook, Simple Pleasures. I'll leave a link below. The water amount is different for this recipe. However, if you do want to use a stand mixer, use the ratios in my cookbook. Cover the dough and let it rest for 30 minutes to allow the flour to properly hydrate. After 30 minutes, we're going to do what we do with no-knead bread making, a round of stretches and folds. You mostly see this for high hydration doughs, but did you know you can use the same method for lower hydration doughs? We just do it a little bit differently. Wet your hand and perform your first series of stretches and folds, turning the bowl as we go. Take one side of the dough, stretch and fold the dough onto the opposite side. Do about 4 to 5 folds. Then take your wet hand and push the dough under itself, creating a rounded ball. This method, along with the stretches and folds, allows you to start to develop the gluten network. As you can see, we went from a shaggy dough to a nice plump dough. Cover the no-knead dough and set aside for 30 minutes to allow the gluten to relax. Then come back and do a second series of stretches and folds. You want to do about 4 to 5 folds per every session. You'll know when to stop because the dough won't be elastic anymore. You'll try to stretch it and it will feel tense. At that point, using a wet hand, you're going to again ball up the dough as we did before and come back in 30 minutes and perform your third series of stretches and folds. You want to repeat this process another 2 times, so you've done 4 rounds of stretches and folds in total. After every series, you do want to ball up the dough, pushing the dough under itself and creating a smooth, plump dough. After the last series of stretches and folds, cover the dough and allow to rise for about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what time of the year you're making bagels. We want the dough to double in size. Transfer your dough onto your clean work surface and we're going to make bagels. You're going to divide the dough in 12 equal portions. Each portion should be about 100 grams. I like to weigh the dough, but it's not necessary. Just try to make the bagels as even as possible. We want these to bake evenly, of course. Now, normally what you do is you roll out each portion of dough into a ball, and usually using your fingers, you punch out a hole through the middle. I personally use a different method, which is much faster in my opinion, and also gives you a more precise bagel, as you'll see. This is how I do it. Roll the doughs into balls, but don't puncture the hole just yet. Set the balls of dough onto some parchment paper, cover, and set aside for 40 minutes. In the meantime, bring a large saucepan of water to a simmer. This step is what gives the bagels that characteristic chewy texture. There is no going around this step. Now, as mentioned, there are different ways to shape bagels, but I'm going to show you the easiest way to get a great result. Fast forward 40 minutes later, just before dipping each bagel into the hot water, we now punch a hole out. You can use a small cookie cutter, anything that's small and sharp. I like to use the back of a piping tip. The reason I like to cut the hole now instead of earlier is so the bagel maintains the hole. If you were to make the hole in the beginning, as the bagels rise, they will lose their hole. Lower each bagel with its parchment paper into the hot water bath for about 30 seconds to a minute. The bagel should float. If they do not float, that means the dough hasn't risen enough. Now, how does putting the bagels into hot water make the interior so deliciously dense and chewy? Well, it's all about starch. When we put the bagels in very hot water that's above 180 degrees Fahrenheit, starch granules at the surface of the dough burst, releasing starch molecules that then link together to make a wrinkly skin around the bagel. The skin is tough enough to stop the bagels expanding as they bake, and because the bagels can't expand, the interior is kept deliciously chewy. This step is what really makes a bagel a bagel. I call this the prune stage. If you've never made bagels before, you might think you ruined them, but fear not. I hope you can now see that it's exactly what we want. As they bake, the skin on the bagel smooths out and loses its wrinkles. If only this method of wrinkle removal worked for skincare. Place the bagels on your lined baking sheets using a slotted spoon, and you want to leave enough space between each bagel. Brush each bagel with a beaten egg white and add your toppings. Everything bagel seasoning is a classic, but even just a mixture of sesame seeds or poppy seeds or even pumpkin seeds, it is fall after all, is delicious. Bake the bagels in a preheated oven at 430 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 220 degrees Celsius, for about 60 to 20 minutes or until golden. You're going to allow the bagels to sit for 5 minutes on the pan and then place them on a rack to cool. Now, homemade bagels are delicious as they are. They're so good, there's no need to toast these. However, this bagel recipe does make a big batch, and if you're not going to eat your bagels super fresh, toasting them is the way to go, of course. I'm using this Made carbon steel pan to toast them. Now look, I know many people use nonstick pans for everything, but I want to encourage you to think about using the right pan for the right application. In this case, when you want to get your pan super hot, please do not use a nonstick pan. High heat will eventually ruin the coating on the nonstick pan. But with carbon steel, there's no problem. It's the perfect cross between a cast iron pan and a stainless steel frying pan. It heats up quickly, it's light enough to handle, and gives you incredible heat control. As you use and season your carbon steel pan, it will develop a naturally non-stick surface. These pans can really handle high heat and go from stovetop to oven to even an open fire up to 1,200 degrees. You can check out the carbon steel collection and my other favorite cookware from Made by using the link in the description box below.